Standing for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Built upon the shoulders of the Constitution, rule of law, and the animating principle that we are all created equal. I need to hear a hallelujah, though I'm not considered a believer by some. I still believe in the warmth of heaven come. I need the rapture I feel when my feet touch the green, green grass of home. Then I know I have reached the valley of kingdom come. And when I reach that valley, I need to see you there, because we don't need a kingdom, we only need free air. We don't seek a king, we seek the brotherhood of man, and we won't fight for bondage, as we need no king or woman. We will stand undivided, because we will raise the fallen. Now I need to hear a hallelujah as we tear down the wall there. The divide between heaven and earth, as tears turn to mirth, as we walk through the valley of death, and I draw my last breath. I know rapture I feel when I touch the green, green grass of home. Then I know I've reached the hollow where my ancestors roam.
Welcome, y'all. This is another episode of the Hillbilly Think Tank, and I'm coming at you live from Tunnel Hill here in Kentucky. And this is where we know that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, y'all, that's what it is all about. Anything else that stops it, yeah, they got to come against us, because we believe that the Constitution, the ethical rule of law, and the guiding principle that we're all created equal, that keeps those principles of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness all together. So y'all, we're here today to talk about from a coal baron to a fleet of oligarch yachts and the Republican general who saw it coming. So kick back, get your cold beverage. It's hot outside. And let's start. So, as I said, I'm Spencer Keck. This is the Hillbilly Think Tank. No, that's not an oxymoron. There have been educated, erudite, and emancipated hillbillies in these hills ever since my family came through the Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone. So in the very first episode of this series, I told you about a vending machine. You put a coin in and a product drops out, except it's not a soda pop. It's a law, a loophole, a favor. Coin in, policy out. Today, I want to show you the machine doing the other thing it does. Not buying a law on the way in, buying protection on the way out. A get out of trouble card dropped right in the tray. And I've got two real cases from real headlines sitting side by side. A coal baron in West Virginia and a fleet of Russian oligarch yachts. Now, to make sense of both, I'm going to lean on a witness you might not expect. Not a Democrat, a Republican, five-star general who ran D-Day and then became president. If you remember, this is the month of D-Day. That was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who used his last words to the nation in 1961 to warn us this exact thing was coming. Let's walk through it slowly. And I'll only tell you what's actually on the record. So, again, like we said, this is the coin-operated democracy that we're here to talk about. Coin in and coin out. Drop one in, and what do you get? So, quick recap. The thesis of this whole series: concentrated money converts into two things: policy on the way in through campaign cash and lobbying, and impunity on the way out. A softer, slower, gentler experience with the law than you or I would ever get. Two-tiered justice. One tier for the forklift, one for the quarter. Last time, that was a principle. Today, it's two case files and a warning. Now, we'll start off with Ike's warning, because it was President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who first we know was a five-star general, that warned us about this first. And so that's where we need to start. So, Eisenhower, January 1961, he goes on television to say goodbye. He's not a firebrand. He's a soldier, the man who commanded the Allied forces in Europe. When he talks about power, the country listens, because nobody alive understands it better. And on his way out of office, he warns about what he called the military-industrial complex. The danger that when enough money, enough industry, and enough government braid together, they start steering the country toward their own comfort, whether anybody intended it or not. His answer wasn't a new law. It was 4 words: an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. He put the last line of defense in our hands, because he'd seen that no institution polices itself forever. Now, hold on to that. Now, what should happen twice? Case 1, the coal baron. Senator Jim Justice, Republican, West Virginia billionaire, and by every account, a close ally of the president. He owns a coal empire. The operations are largely run by his son, Jay. Now, this isn't a one-time accusation. It's a documented decade. Stay with me because the timeline is the story. So back in 2016, the federal government and 5 states, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia, they reached a settlement, a consent decree with the Justice Department. That's where this comes in. They reached this consent decree with the Justice Department, and companies are to resolve more than 23,000, I'll say that again, more than 23,000 alleged Clean Water Act violations. The companies paid $900,000 in penalties and promised in writing to keep it up. The law that's at stake here, by the way, is the one that keeps a mine from putting things like arsenic into the water that runs past people's homes. Now, that didn't clean it up. By 2023, a federal appeals court, the Fourth Circuit, affirmed another $2.5 million. $2.5 million in penalties against them. This time for violating the very settlement that they had signed. The Justice Department said in a filing that these companies have, and I'm quoting, a long history of Clean Water Act violations. And before anybody tells me this is left-wing spin, that $2.5 million ruling was reported by Fox News. This is just the record. Then in 2024, the senator's son, Jay, was hit with a civil contempt order for failing to even respond to another Clean Water Act lawsuit. So line it up. A decade of settlements, broken promises, affirmed penalties, and a contempt order. That's the backdrop when in 2026, career officials at the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the Justice Department finally opened a criminal investigation. I don't know about you guys, but y'all, I think it is criminal to make me drink water with arsenic in it, or anybody that I know. And I know a lot of folks out there in Eastern Kentucky where we're talking about. All right, y'all. So they opened a criminal investigation to find out whether all of this crossed the line from violation you pay a fine for into actual crime. There's a difference. And here's the scale of that. The Justice Department only brings about a dozen criminal Clean Water Act cases in an entire year. This was going to be one of them. And then it wasn't. As prosecutors were fighting in court just to get the company's records, the Deputy Attorney General's office, then led by Todd Blanche, who's since become acting Attorney General, shut it down. The order, per person familiar with it, was 2 words: pencils down. The official reason? The case didn't fit the administration's priorities and was better handled with civil fines. So we will never know whether there was a crime there, because the people with the power to find out were told to stop looking. A former federal prosecutor of 24 years, Rick Mountcastle, warned about exactly this: a government keeping an untouchables list, a list of people the law simply doesn't reach. Now, that brings us to case 2, the Oligarchs' yachts. Now, the second case, and it's quieter, which is what makes it worse. So before we get to the quiet part, let's just look at some official reporting from where we're headed. So,
A Russian billionaire's super yacht has caught global attention, not for luxury, but for where it has been spotted. A couple of days ago, a super yacht defied Donald Trump's Hormuz blockade. Ship tracking data shows that the Nord, which has been owned by Russia's oligarch Alexei Mordashov, traversed the Strait of Hormuz. Now, let's tell you who exactly Alexei Mordashov is.
now, they're going to tell us who he is. You can read it right there. We'll go back to that in a second. This yacht, supersized yacht, just about the size of one of the fast frigate, guided missile fast frigates that I served on the first Gulf War. It made it through that Strait of Hormuz that's supposed to be shut down by both the United States of America and Iran. Doesn't that sound interesting? So we know Iran is allies with Russia. We've talked on here before about how at the beginning of the war, during the very beginning of the war, this administration allowed Iran to sell oil to Russia. Very interesting. And they allowed the Russian oil to come through so it could be sold by the Russians. And both of these countries were making money while we were attacking Iran. And both of these countries have and had up to that point embargoes against them. But we lifted the Russian oil embargo and we lifted the Iranian oil embargo. And this Russian yacht, super ship, makes it through the Strait of Hormuz. Very interesting.
Man at the heart of this impasse, well, he is Russia's richest man with an estimated net worth of around $37 billion. He built his fortune primarily through steel as the largest shareholder in Severstal, which is one of Russia's biggest steel producers, where he controls roughly 77% of the company. He's also considered close to Russian President Vladimir Putin and a key stakeholder in Russia's gold mining giant, Nordgold. Mordashov is also regarded as a key figure in Russia's industrial and energy sectors. He is under sanctions as well from the US, UK, and the European Union after Russia's attack on Ukraine for his links with Putin. After this attack, Mordashov quickly transferred some of his key assets, including shares of the leisure company TUICH and Nordgold, to his family.
So, the richest Russian, I thought that was Putin, but apparently it's this guy. His yacht slipped through the Strait of Hormuz during combat. Come on, y'all. Come on. We can put the pieces of this puzzle together. I think even my 7th grade students could put the pieces of this puzzle together.
Now, the timing of his super yacht crossing the Hormuz is what makes this movement stand out. Iran announced the closure of the strait following the outbreak of hostilities linked to US and Israeli strikes earlier this year. The Hormuz, which is a vital choke point for global energy supplies, has been at the center of this war and the current standoff, and only a handful of ships carrying crucial energy sources have passed the strait. Then how did a super yacht of a Russian billionaire manage to cross? Well, Russia and Iran are long-standing allies. They've become closer, in fact, in the recent years through a 2025 treaty towards intelligence and security cooperation. Just days ago, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had arrived in Russia to meet with President Putin after the discussions with mediators in Pakistan and Oman over the weekend.
Very, very convenient that the powerful U.S. Navy let this ship through. And the Iranian Navy, of course, would have no problem with one of the oligarchs of Russia come through in his luxury yacht. So that's only one yacht scenario we've got. So think about it. These oligarchs, they don't make their money in ethical and just ways. We know that they're attached to and at the hip with, or leaders of, and many times, their Russian mafia. And this just gets to slip right through. Very interesting. So, all right, let's look at another story before we keep on going. All right, y'all. Apparently, I made a mistake here. Did not switch over. I apologize for that.
Boat.
All right.
It's got its own.
So, sorry for that long interlude. Here we go.
President Biden warned Russian oligarchs his administration planned to seize their ill-gotten gains, and now the world is targeting the billionaire's extravagant yachts. Friday, Italian authorities in the port of Trieste seized the ship known as Sailing Yacht A, worth about $578 million, belonging to Andrei Melnichenko. He owns a fertilizer producer and coal company. This followed the impoundings of Lady M, that's owned by Alexei Mordashov, the so-called richest man in Russia, and Lena, belonging to Gennady Timchenko, who controls an oil exporting company. French officials seized the $120 million Amore Vero, claiming it's owned by Igor Sashin. That's the head of the Russian state-owned oil company Rosneft. Other oligarchs are trying to prevent this from happening. After it left port in Montenegro on March the 2nd, the Galactica supernova, owned by Lukoil CEO Vazhit Alekperov, turned off automatic tracking systems, which is against the law for a ship of its size. After Britain sanctioned Roman Abramovich, the billionaire who's selling his stake in the football club Chelsea, his two super yachts began moving reportedly to reach countries without formal extradition agreements.
So, we already see that these oligarchs don't care about international law. We saw their report before this one happened that we're talking about today. Before he moved through the Strait of Hormuz, they had already had a history of turning off their tracking devices, which are required for ships of this size by international law. But these guys believe, and they know, as we're going to see further in this reporting, they are above the law, especially above American law.
His Eclipse is the world's second largest such boat. It's got its own missile defense system, a mini submarine as well. After recent renovations, its estimated value is $1 billion. And rumors are rampant that the secret owner of Scheherazade, that's a 459-foot, $700 million super yacht currently anchored in a coastal town in Tuscany, might be Vladimir Putin himself. The ship was built in 2020.
You think? It's got missile defense systems as good or better than we had on the fast frigate, guided missile frigate that I was on in the Gulf War. It's got a submarine with it, which my fast frigate was far too small to have. Come on, y'all. And yet these guys are slipping through the Strait of Hormuz, slipping through. If you believe that our U.S. Navy is incapable of catching these, and we know Iran wants them there, so they're not disallowing them.
20, registered in the Marshall Islands, boasts 2 helicopter decks, a swimming pool that converts to a dance floor, and gold-plated bathroom fixtures. The ship's British captain told the New York Times that Putin did not own the yacht and that he'd never been on it. The captain said the mystery owner was not on the sanctions list, but that a non-disclosure agreement prevented him from revealing more. Putin owns very little in his own name and often uses homes and ships that are owned by the oligarchs. Joining me now is Alex Finley, a former CIA officer who's in.
As we know that the oligarchs all take care of each other. It's the mafia. It's the Russian mafia. So anybody who doubts that, hey, I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona I would love to lease to you. You know, we'll just do a 25-year lease. I want to keep my options open. All right, so here are those super yachts that have so far been seized from Russian oligarchs. Now, this seized before 2025, that is. So the Amadea, again, size of a fast frigate. The Tango, also the same size as a guided missile frigate, maybe even longer. The Lady M, there you go. Supposedly owned by that Russian billionaire Alexei Mordashov that we were talking about. There it is, ported in Italy. The Lena, again, tells who they belong to. The CIA. Again, all that is more than, from what I can see there, that's going to be larger than a destroyer. It'll be more of almost cruiser size. The Valerie, oh, the smallest so far. And yet not small. The Amore Vero. So, this is just setting it up for you guys to understand. The oligarchs' yachts. Again, it's quieter. Probably hasn't made your radar before now. But in 2022, after Russia invaded the Ukraine, the Justice Department stood up a unit task force that was called klepto capture. Its job, enforce the Russia sanctions and seize the assets of the oligarchs. We're talking about the Russian oligarchs, the billionaires that are close to Putin. It worked. It indicted Russian tycoons, seized super yachts, and as we've seen, some of those super yachts are actually military ships with submarines and missile defense systems, and luxury properties, and by a bipartisan Senate accounting, locked up around $170 million in oligarch assets worth hundreds of millions and more pending. Funded, by the way, with both Republican and Democratic money. Now, that came from the AP, Reuters, and a U.S. Senate letter from February 2025. Then, in February 2025, an attorney general, when Attorney General Bondi's first day in office, a memo went out titled "Around the Total Elimination of Cartels and Transnational Criminal Organizations." And tucked inside of this, klepto capture was disbanded. Attorneys sent back to their old desks, resources redirected to the border. And the same wave, the department also shut down a foreign influence task force created under the first Trump administration to fight foreign interference in our elections, and softened enforcement of the law that makes foreign agents register when they lobby here in the United States of America. So in one day, the government stood down its watchdogs over Russian oligarch money and foreign election influence. Nobody got arrested. Nobody got a pardon. The government just quietly changed who it was looking at. So y'all, I think I can see it. Can you? There is a pattern here. Are we seeing it? I'm seeing it. So again, y'all, apparently I messed up. You aren't hearing what I'm hearing. Keep forgetting to switch back and forth. I apologize. All right. So going to come back to the CNN position. I apologize for that. Let me just go on ahead right now and say, give a shout out to everybody here that's being patient with me today. I
An
apologize
update
for
from the
not being
Wave
on
storm
my game.
tracking team has
So-
arrived.
We've got Tom Armstrong on here. Thank you, Tom, for coming on. Carl, appreciate you coming in here and, go ahead and backing up what I'm saying. Yeah, and providing some information there. Just, some of the same stuff I've gotten here, and you're putting it right there in the links. I appreciate that, Carl. We've also got quite a few of you on here. I've been clicking on there to show what you said. Hello, everyone. I appreciate you tuning in. And sorry for the quiet pauses here while I forgot to switch back over to the video so you guys could see what I'm seeing. But all right, so all of these yachts, we've had the pictures up. Let's go back now to CNN talking about they have a person in the government who was actually in charge of tracking these vessels.
It's tough to figure out who owns them.
You're exactly right. Most of these ships are owned actually by front companies, and they have property managers who sort of run them. Most of them are flagged in places like you noted, the Marshall Islands or the Cayman Islands, the Isle of Wight, excuse me. So it's very difficult to sort of untangle who the beneficial owner is. There's shell company upon shell company. And so trying to follow all of that back and figure out exactly who the owner is very difficult. And it's done that way on purpose.
What are you noting as you're tracking them? Is there any concerted effort that comes to light, or are they all just going in separate directions? What are the patterns?
So far, we've seen a number of them that have left Europe. They seem to be heading south. There's questions if they would try to go through the Bosphorus and to the Black Sea, but
all right, Arbiter class. Sorry, I have to disagree with you. I absolutely believe that we must intercept these yachts and we must put an end to foreign interference around the world when it's Russian oligarch, which means Russian mafia interference. We've got to stop it cold. We've had too much of this as it is. But again, that's my opinion. All right. So coming back to our story, one day the government stood down its watchdogs over Russian oligarch money. And in one day, the government stood down foreign election influence watch. That came as soon as Pam Bondi came into office. And again, nobody got arrested. Nobody got a pardon. The government just quietly changed who it was looking at. All right, the pattern. Let's look at this pattern. Two different stories. One story, a coal baron in West Virginia. He was the governor of West Virginia. Then he was the senator from West Virginia. Also never fully divested from his companies while he was governor or senator. Violated 26,000 times the Clean Waters Act. So one coal baron, one fleet of yachts, but look at the direction they both tilt towards. Because the most powerful thing the machine can't do isn't fixing one case. It's deciding quietly which kinds of people the law watches and which it just leaves alone. You don't have to rig the game if you get to pick which players the referee is allowed to look at. The coal baron, the oligarch's yacht, the foreign money in our elections, different headlines, same tilt. The watchdog keeps getting called off the wealthy and the connected. At some point, you stop calling that a string of coincidences. Now, some people say I need to argue the other side and to mean it. So, all right, let's just kick back a little bit. I'll keep my promise to you. If all I do is make you angry, I'm just running an outright rage machine of my own. So, the strongest case against me, both cases, on the coal probe, prosecutors have discretion. They can't bring every case. Criminal pollution cases are rare on purpose, and there's a real argument that pollution should usually be handled with fines and cleanup, not prison. Plenty of people across the spectrum worry about over-criminalization in American life. On the oligarch task force, the other side is even stronger, and you deserve it straight. Cartels and fentanyl are not a fake priority. Something like 70,000 Americans a year are dying from these opioids, and moving prosecutors toward that is defensible, maybe right. The administration said the oligarch cases continue, just not from headquarters. And the same administration's Treasury Secretary publicly pushed for tougher sanctions on Russian oil. Of course, it's the same Treasury Secretary that defended lifting the sanctions on the Russian oil during the war. So, but back to my other side's argument. All right, so the Treasury Secretary said the old approach wasn't muscular enough. So they went soft. It's too simple. The picture, according to them, is genuinely mixed. So why does it still bother me? Not because fighting cartels is wrong. It isn't. It's the pattern. And who keeps landing on the comfortable side of every one of these calls? When the coal baron, the oligarch, and the foreign donor all catch the same break, at some point, you stop calling it a series of reasonable judgment calls and start asking who the machine is built to protect. That's a question, not a charge. And Eisenhower already told us whose job it is to keep asking it. And again, my connections I'm making, I've already reported on this show how ludicrous it is to allow our enemy, Putin, to make billions, as he did, on bringing his oil and selling it during our war and having exchanges with Iran, and Iran making first sale $14 billion when their military budget was far less than that. And yet right there in the middle of attacking them and fighting them, we allowed them to sell their war and exchange it with Russia. And then one of their oligarchs is slipping through the Strait of Hormuz when we've got the mightiest navy in the world blockading the Strait of Hormuz. You tell me where the connection is, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Well, You know, again, Eisenhower already told us whose job it is to keep asking these questions. The answer, according to Ike, it's us. Because here's what Ike actually meant. His warning wasn't really about tanks. It was that the power concentrates. Money and government and industry drift toward each other. And once they're braided, they steer the whole ship toward their own comfort. Not because somebody's twirling a mustache, because that's what concentrated power does when nobody's watching. And his answer was us, an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. Regular people awake, refusing to be lulled to sleep. That's the whole reason I make this show. Not to make you cynical, the opposite, to keep you alert. Because cynicism is just being asleep with extra steps. And a sleeping citizenry is the one thing the machine can always count on. And I've already seen it in my comments over here. Someone said, hey, I don't care. Using a word that I won't repeat here on air ever to say how much they don't care. Doesn't bother them. Yeah, that's fine. It's just that I do care because I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States. And I would not allow anything to subvert it. And so these guys think they can sneak around with their yachts, actually acting like they're yachts when they're actually military vessels, and that we were just going to agree to give them the billions upon billions that we did. We funded Putin's war against Ukraine during the middle of our war against Iran. And we're supposed to be okay with that and say, hey, it's too risky for us to say it's not okay. Well, if that's the way it is, y'all, let's just fold it in. I wore that uniform for nothing. And I'm supposed to be scared and set back and say, yeah, Russia, you can pull the strings. Bibi, you can pull the strings. And we'll just be too scared to stop you. Because, oh, you might actually do something against us. Oh, yeah, because we've already shown that we're a paper tiger. Now, Ukraine had Russia on the ropes, but we allowed Russia then to get billions more to go ahead and come back at the Ukraine with when Ukraine had them on the ropes. If that's okay with you, and you don't mind a democracy getting flushed down the drain abroad or here, that's cool. All right. So, again, a coal baron, a fleet of yachts, and a general turned president from 1961. What's any of it got to do with a magistrate's race right here in District 3, Hardin County, Kentucky, that I'm running for? Well, Eisenhower answered that himself. The brake on concentrated power isn't in Washington. It's the citizen. And the closest, realest place that a citizen ever gets to govern is right here, local, the county, the fiscal court, the road and the emergency medical services and the budget. You can walk down to the courthouse and read. And actually, during session, you can walk in there and say something to everyone in public yourself. Tell them how you feel. If I'm elected, tell us how you feel. I can't stop a pencils down order, and I can't restart a task force, but I can be the kind of public servant like Ike was talking about. Awake, plain spoken, and impossible to lull to sleep. In District 3, the watchdog doesn't get called off the powerful. The budget gets read out loud. The contract gets questioned. And no family in Colesburg, Youngers Creek, Tunnel Hill, or town ends up on an untouchables list or a forgotten one. I took an oath to that Constitution in a Navy uniform, and I also was Marine Corps regs when I was with the Marines, so I also took the oath once in the Marine Corps uniform. And I wore that uniform the same as Ike wore his. A Republican general and a Navy hospital corpsman can agree on this one. An alert citizenry treated equal under the law. That's the whole American deal. I'm just asking to defend it at the level closest to home. So, y'all, that's the law. And as I said earlier, right here, we know that we cannot have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if we don't uphold the Constitution, if we don't also uphold laws that are ethical, laws that are just, and most importantly, if we don't recognize that we're all created equal under this law, then we're in trouble. So, that's the machine in this episode caught twice. Sometimes it gets by, get out of trouble, get out of jail card for a friend. Sometimes it just quietly decides who the law is allowed to look at. And the only thing that's ever stopped that in the whole history of this country is people like you refusing to look away. Stay alert, stay knowledgeable, stay unbuyable. Ike would have wanted it that way. I'm Spencer Keck, your neighbor, your doc, running for Magistrate District 3, Hardin County. This is the Hillbilly Think Tank. Call or text me at 270-872-3732. Find the show on YouTube at the Hillbilly Think Tank and the campaign on Facebook and Instagram at Spencer Keck. Come ask me the hard questions. I'll be the one who answers them. Let's remember everyone deployed overseas. And if you never forget that to live up to united we stand, divided we fall, we cannot let ourselves be divided if we recognize we are our brothers and sisters' keeper. Bless your corazon. See you in the next one. I'll see you out at Freeman Lake on Thursday. Keck. I'm out, baby.
Because we will raise the fallen. Oh!